stay at Hever Castle in Kent. This is the day that we met up with my cousin Helen, which was really lovely to do that. This castle was probably one of my favourites, I think, because it was really quite heavily detailed and decorated, as you can see in the photos. It dates back to the 14th century, and it was once the childhood home of Anne Boleyn, who was the second wife of Henry VIII and also the mother of Elizabeth I. There was beautiful panelled rooms and lovely furniture and lots of paintings and antiques. The beautiful ceilings that you can see were all done by hand, so there were no sort of special rulers or levels or anything like that. It was all done by eye, and obviously the people that did it were absolutely amazing master craftsmen. Interestingly, Anne Boleyn became queen and was only queen for 1,000 days. Apparently Henry's love for her, which didn't last very long if she was only queen for 1,000 days, and her insistence that she became his wife rather than his mistress, led to the king splitting from the Church of Rome, the Catholic Church, and creating the Church of England. And this has had repercussions throughout all of England and Europe. It was an amazing sort of stance by Anne that led to that becoming King Henry VIII's decision. As I said, though, she obviously didn't last very long, or for more than 1,000 days. And ironically, one of his next wives, Anne of Cleves, became the owner of this castle at some stage in the future. So really quite sad, really, because it was Anne's family home and then became something that another Anne, one of his future wives, inherited. Sadly, the castle did fall into disrepair over the sort of 18th century, and in July of 1903, William Waldorf Astor of American Hotel fame and a very, very wealthy man, he actually purchased Hever Castle and embarked on restoring it and creating the amazing gardens, which were absolutely beautiful. The gardens and castle were completed in 2006 and 2008, and William Astor was actually incredibly particular that the repairs be carried out in a time-honoured way. He didn't allow people to work on them and use modern things. They had to do it with the best materials that they could that were equivalent to 16th century. Everything you see is probably been touched by William Astor's workmen, but it was beautiful. The ceilings, the wood panelling in the lower rooms, absolutely stunning place. I would go back and have another look at this Hever Castle in Kent. Definitely worth a visit. You can see the cathedral from the castle, but it's a newer build. We started on our tour, and this is the constable's room, which now has no floors or ceilings. But you can see it goes all the way down there, and then it travels all the way up Many, many levels. Those arches you can see there and there and there are the well shaft, which allowed them to access fresh water all the way in, down to the basement where they stored things. This lovely space is probably the cesspit where the toilets would empty out. You can see that chute over there on that wall. You can just make out that darker space. That's probably from the toilet robes or guardia robes up above. Pretty revolting job, eh? This is the chapel in Rochester Castle. It's only a small room and it's built directly above the guardroom entrance to invoke God's blessing over the castle. The wife of Robert the Bruce was kept in the castle as a prisoner. She may well have been permitted to come here and pray. It's only small, but it's really quite a lovely little place. This would have been the level where the great hall was. Those beautiful columns and the fireplace you can see on the ends and in the centre. That would have been the place where the king met with all his special guests, etc. There would have been lots and lots of candles lighting the area, and it would have been a beautiful space. This space here looks down into the Great Hall and is called the Mural Gallery. It runs around the outside of the castle itself and is the width of the base of the wall. So you can see how wide it is. That's actually below this level they kept the walls thick to avoid or to help stop enemies' battering rams breaking down the wall. But up here they could have the space inside usable and bigger windows. So this is to let light into that grand hall. As you can see, the bigger windows on the opposite side compared to the smaller ones down below. Fascinating the way they were built without any major tools or anything. And when you look into the wall itself, you can see the various levels of history even though shells were potentially very, very old, given that this building is 900 years old. It's another view into the great room, which would be divided by that wall and could be two spaces. And then back into the top of the wall, we come around here and down this little flight of stairs into another part of the mural gallery. You can see the windows and the depth of the wall. Even still, it's pretty thick. During the siege of 1215, this corner of the building was damaged, and there's a crack up in the roof. You won't be able to see it, but yeah, see how the wall kinks back? Just slightly kinks back in, and it's all been repaired. You may be able to make out that slither of a huge arch on the top wall with the smaller arch in between. That was once a big arch that got filled in, maybe due to an attack at some stage, or maybe it housed the throne of the king at some stage. The historians don't really know, but it's an interesting little detail. You can see how high up we are in the castle from here. And And you can also see on that opposite wall through the archway a very ornate fireplace with two little pigeons who are now the only people that live in this castle, or the only things that live in this castle anymore. You can see that the outside of this tower is actually round. The two inside walls are still square, but the outside edges are round. This was because the tower had actually been demolished during the siege of 1215. The men inside still held out for another week, but they were to be overrun eventually. But when it was rebuilt round, as that's meant to be a harder shape to undermine and to lay siege on. Interesting little fact. There was a later siege of the castle by the peasants' uprising in the 17th century thereabouts, and at some stage towards the end of that period there was a huge fire that took out all the timber work. That's why there's no floors or anything in that centre area, because there was no timber left surviving. And then pieces of the stone were then taken for building houses within the town, etc., etc. But at some stage it's been restored to this point, and it's become a great tourist attraction for the city of Rochester. So I have a little footnote from after the tour from the top of the castle. The towers, etc. themselves, the stone wasn't removed from there. The stone that was used around the town to build a number of places was taken from the two outer walls. There's very little of the main outer wall that remains in Rochester, and then you've got some that you can see just behind those trees. You've got some of the outer bailey that is still here, but it was that stone that was removed. So most of the stone in the actual tower itself is the original stone. And there's an outside view of that round tower that was rebuilt after the 1215 siege that you can just see in there. So so just a little footnote extra to bear in mind. What a quirky little street. It's all a little bit different. This is the original High Street, is it? This is Watling Road, what was Watling Road.
Well, I don't know, it's called High Street.
Oh, well, in that case, it's what was Watling Road, which was the Roman road. Not quite sure if you can see this, but you'll see that all these buildings are leaning, particularly that one. You can see how that's leaning so much. This is actually the original High Street, what was called Watling Road, which was the Roman road main route from Dover to London. So there's a fair bit of history gone up and down these streets, I should imagine. It's really cool, all the different quirky buildings. So really an interesting place. Tells you there. This is Rochester Cathedral. It's the second oldest cathedral in England, second only to Canterbury Cathedral. And there's been people worshipping here since AD 604, which is rather amazing. There's various bishops up on that wall in relief carving. Amazing place. You can see the organ pipes have all got decoration on them, which is rather special too. You'll see a similarity in the style between this and the castle where we were. The central wall, the arches with the checked kind of decoration, and then those arches up the top. Looking down the centre of the cathedral from the front part of the church. And the honour wall is all done with mosaic tile. I'll go in close so you can see. Each part of the letter is individually done with a tile. Interestingly, all the original pews seem to have been removed and left with these more modern chairs, which look quite strange and out of place. If you look closely, you'll see the original steps under these. They've been worn away. They're called the pilgrim steps because it's where the people coming to the church would have walked up. They've been worn away by so many steps. Found out that pews are a fairly new invention by the Victorians, and most people would have come and stood, which is another thought. People would have leant against the walls if they felt they needed to be supported. However, there are still the very decorative pews and things in here for the bishops and archbishops and the deacons and I guess the choir. So, and again you can see another beautiful view of the organ, which is just stupendous. This is the main altar at the front of the church. Nobody's allowed past that barrier, I assume, other than the bishop or the main person. But yeah, it's a beautiful carving of the Lord's Last Supper up on that dais behind the wall, and then all the stained glass windows that you can see up to the ceiling. This tomb topping is very, very worn. You can see the wear on the stone after hundreds and hundreds of years. This is a chapter doorway. It was around 1350 AD. That's one of the finest ones to still be intact. It leads into the cathedral library, and all of the different figures carved around it indicate different things. It's beautiful. And then you have the amazing wooden door. This is part of the crypt and dates from 1130. And there's a document down here called the Textus Rothenus, which is known as the possible precursor to the Magna Carta. So that's kind of fascinating. All sorts of ancient things. Not the food, that's obviously new plastic. But in here, you've got some different things. Psalters and calendar fragments. Psalters were books of the Psalms. And then through into this space. And this is the vault, so it's the underneath of the church, and the way the roofs are done to hold it up. It's incredible. Such a pretty space, the way it's all lit to show the shadows. Isn't that lovely? So lovely. This is the Ithamar Chapel, where one of the fourth bishop of Rochester and the first English bishop is buried, 655 AD. This is a very, very old book called the Textus Rufensis. It was written in 1120 and predates the Magna Carta, which was 1215. Incredible to think these things have survived. But yeah, that's the book on a very, very, very old book. This is the cathedral garden. Such a beautiful little spot. You can see the wall there. I'm not sure whether I think it's complete. But yeah, it's beautiful.